The occurrence of this speech means that sadly our class has come to an end. It has been a period of learning and becoming more successful in a way that I speak. While it may not have been always enjoyable, I know these skills will always benefit me for the rest of my life. As someone who has generalized anxiety disorder, I can assure you that this class was one of the last things I would ever want to take. Within the first few class periods, the thought of dropping this class was constant. Whenever I would give a speech, I would race through all my words, shake, and constantly look down at my sheet. Sometimes I would fidget so much that in my first speech, I almost fell over. Eye contact was completely out of the question. As the course progressed, I learned to look up and not just read straight from my outline, because that actually made me more nervous to mess up. The shaking decreased as I learned to ground myself in spots as I gave my key points. I would love to tell you that my speaking slowed down, but sadly, that is not the case. From my last peer critique of my persuasive speech, this was stated. One thing she could work on is slowing down when she talks. Her speech had a lot of funny lines, and I feel that if she had taken the time to slow down, then they would have been delivered even better than they already did. She's a great public speaker with an amazing ability to capture her audience. She just needs to let the audience appreciate that by slowing down. Visual aids seem to make or break all of my speeches for me. As an art major, being hands-on is basically a must to keep my attention. I think that visual aids help the audience be extremely engaged in the speech itself. They can help you gain attention, enhance understanding, memory, organize ideas, and illustrate a sequence of events or procedures, is a line taken from the Handbook of Public Speaking. For my informative speech, I educated everyone on the history, making of, and how to use chopsticks. At first, I was worried that the chopsticks would be too much of a distraction, and they ended up being a slight one and kind of caused a bit of chaos during my speech. My peer reviewer for my informative piece had this to say about the use. August also made her speech a lot better by actually bringing in chopsticks for everyone as a prop for her presentation. This ensured me that these visual aids kept my audience well engaged with everything I was saying and made them excited to learn something new. Using PowerPoints is also very powerful visual aids that can make or break your presentation. When executed correctly, it can also keep the audience engaged and you organized. On the other spectrum, using just a physical object such as a phone that I used in my informative speech is very weak. Before giving this speech, I thought that it would help the audience be more engaged on what I was saying about not using technology, but that was actually the opposite of the truth. Since I did not have a PowerPoint, my presentation was cluttered and really sped through and overall unorganized because I didn't have anything to lean back on but my outline. While only having an outline to lean back on can be particularly beneficial in a toast or award acceptance, I can assure you that it is not when giving a speech to persuade, especially if you're like me and you'll tend to cut things out last minute because it's not on the PowerPoint and you don't want to say that anymore. Previous to taking this communications class, I had never even thought about who or where the audience was from, just things that I would want to hear if someone was public speaking, or things the teacher might want to hear based off of the checklist rubric. Understanding how people listen can help you improve your ability to connect with your audience. If you understand what holds the listener's attention as well as how to navigate around the barriers to effective listening, you can make your message stick, is an excerpt from the Public Speaking Handbook. The hardest challenge to overcome for me during audience analysis is to think of the audience as actual individual people who want to hear what I am saying. This idea can be terrifying and also confusing when you think about how to go and prepare your speech because everyone is so different from each other. The main goal is to find a common denominator that you all have and to go from there. From actually thinking about the audience before my speech, I was able to keep the audience engaged and give them useful information they can use in their own lives rather than something they'll just forget in a day. Now, when I prepare to give speeches in other classes, I'll be able to understand the common goal and prepare my speech towards that whole audience instead of just hitting all the check marks. Credible conclusion was very strong and relevant to your audience. Explained the offenses well and described well. Explained why well also. Melissa Reisman through personal communication on my persuasive speech. I think my credibility and using facts with citations made most of my speeches very ethical. While it was a lot of responsibility to make sure all my references were correct, it really helped me to gain the audience's trust and made them know they could rely on me. For me personally, listening has always also been a struggle as an audience member. I tend to start to wander when people were giving speeches. Throughout the course, I tried to practice different skills during the different speeches, such as selecting and actually repeating in my head when the person was saying, taking notes, watching body movements, and connecting them with what the person was saying. And finally, I would doodle along with what their topic and words were. In the end, the technique that worked best for me was when I would doodle along with what they were saying so I could really tune into it. While I think it was helpful for me in remembering what the speaker had to say, I think it was very distracting to the speaker sometimes and discouraging because they couldn't see my face. It also didn't give them any indication to see how they were doing because I wasn't looking at them and I was almost looking away. Look for clusters of cues. Instead of focusing on just one bit of behavior, look for several nonverbal cues, an excerpt from the Handbooking of Public Speaking. When I was listening to another speech outside of this class given by Dr. Giltner, I noticed all of his body movements. I was able to tie them into what he was saying and notice when he made really important points. Sadly, during our elevator pitch, there was unforeseen circumstances that made me unable to work in my group on said speech. Although, when working with Megan on our special occasion speeches, I learned that communication is 100% key. We made sure to let each other know what we would be saying and organize how we wanted to give our speeches so that everything would go in a nice flow and not seem completely rough and unpracticed. This new skill actually just recently came in handy in my 3D class for my art. We had to work together as a group to create an art installation, and because of my experiences in this speech class, I was able to effectively communicate with my group on what we would be doing and when we would be meeting. In conclusion, this semester's speech class has been a roller coaster of emotion for me. While I'm grateful for all the experiences and knowledge I gained during this course, I am still slightly terrified to stand up in front of an audience. At least from now on, I am able to create a successful outline and follow it without completely clamming up. From now on, I will work on pushing myself out of my comfort zone and speaking more often.